I've played tons of NES games, some were relatively short, some were incredibly long. But which games are the longest on the system? Well, off the bat, RPGs. Traditionally, role-playing games require an investment of time and patience. That's the purpose of this episode, to talk about the top 10 longest NES games based on how long it takes to beat them if you were to just do the main campaign, the bare minimums you need to beat the title. In some cases, I hate to think how long they would take if you did a 100% run. Also, bear in mind, do be kind of patient with me because A, I'm sick, and 2, because I'm basing this on the website How Long to Beat. If you've never been to How Long to Beat, the website, it's where people report the time that it takes for them to beat a game, so it can be very subjective. I've gone to that website, I've asked some friends, and I've done my own research based on just numerous long plays. I'm all about transparency, and this is a more difficult episode to make, but that being said, let's begin. SNK. They made a bunch of games. Many of them were arcade titles. But that wasn't the case for Baseball Stars. This game is also historically significant in the history of the NES due to it being the first sports game on the NES to have a battery backup. Now you might be asking, why would you need a battery backup on a baseball game? Well, Baseball Stars is more than just your average baseball game, it's more like an RPG. Sure, you could just play endless exhibition matches, that's probably what I would do. But the meat and bones of what made Baseball Stars what it is was the ability to create a player, name your teams, and earn money to update your team members, increase fan attendance, upgrade your abilities, and also purchase and trade them. This game is fundamentally awesome, but to me, it can have that SNK jackhammer to the dick difficulty that we all know and love from them. If you want to build the best possible team, it'll take about 19 hours to do so. Lemmings is a cult classic. It was created by DMA Design, specifically Mike Daly, David Jones, and Russell Kay. Now you might not recognize the name DMA Designs, but if you're familiar with Rockstar, they are Rockstar North, the creators of Grand Theft Auto. A little bit of history for you. By the way, if you're interested in the history of Rockstar games, I do have a video about it, but it's rather long, so if you want to watch it, make sure that you can set aside some time. Link will be at the end of the video and down below. Now, Lemmings is a puzzle game where you tell absolute fucking idiots how to survive in a given environment, with 20 stages on the PC. Now, I can't vouch for the NES, but I do know that you're limited to 14 Lemmings, and this is because of sprite limitations on the system itself. From playing the PC version, I can comfortably say this is a boring game to me, but it might not be to you. If you want to spend 20 hours on a watered-down version of a PC port, then that's your choice, but I'd much rather play this on an Amiga if given the chance. Destiny of an Emperor is a strategy RPG made by Yoshinori Takenaka and Yoshiki Okamoto, the latter of which made Gyrus as well, and you know how much I love my Gyrus. Destiny of an Emperor itself follows the storyline of the popular historical novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms by Luo Guanzhang, but has nothing to do with the Koei line. This is Capcom's franchise, specifically the Tenchi wo Kurao franchise. The whole premise is you play as Liu Bei, Shang Fei, and Guan Yu to fight the Yellow Turban rebels, followers of the sorcerer Zhang Xiao. That's basically it. And while it's based on the book, it does differ a little bit, so if you want more historical accuracy, I'd say play the actual Romance of the Three Kingdoms franchise instead. This game is cool, it has branching storylines, but if you want to play it all and see all the lore, you'll need to dedicate about 20 hours towards it. Many people consider it an underrated gem on the NES, but many other people feel like it's kind of subpar, which, let's be honest, many of the early tactical RPGs that tackled the Romance era tended to anyway. It's a smaller franchise as well, only containing 4 games. If you know Ultima, you know that Lord British didn't hold back on the length it takes to play a game. In many ways, it was astounding how much story could be shoved inside of a little NES card. Lord British, for anybody who doesn't know, is the nickname for Richard Garriott, who created the Ultima franchise, and even before that created Akalabeth Temple of Doom, which many consider to be the first commercial RPG ever released in competition with Wizardry. Without those two, we probably wouldn't have Final Fantasy or Dragon Warrior. The thing that stands out about Ultima 4 is that there's no clear objective. The whole idea of the game is to improve your moral compass, or your self-improvement, meaning that you have to take the time to uncover and understand the 8 virtues. With these 8 virtues, we can enter the Stygian Abyss to get to the Codex of Ultimate Wisdom and become an avatar. It's very easy to mess up and lose your virtues, and you need the truth, love, courage, and greater axiom of infinity to beat the game. So don't lose them. All in all, it takes about 21 and a half hours to beat this. 52 hours if you want to do everything. Wizardry 1 was a pioneer of the industry, and when you have something great, you might as well expand on it, right? Well, that's what Surtech did when they released Wizardry: The Knight of Diamonds in 1982. Now, the PC version is mean. It's mean. It's a mean game. And it requires you to have export data from the original Wizardry to play it. Thankfully, in the ports, that isn't the case, and you can just create 6 new characters. Plus, in the NES version, we get full color graphics, which you won't get on the original release. Also, the original one's hard as fuck, so might do a little bit better on the NES port. Just be ready to spend the same amount of time as Ultima 4, 21 and a half hours. Created by Michael Cranford and developed by Interplay, the Bards Tale is a straightforward RPG that makes you crawl through massive dungeons. As a bard, you can use magical songs that are essentially spells, and those same spells are used to solve puzzles. There are 85 spells that you can use, and if you were playing the PC version, you'd have to manually type these spells out from the guidebook. But we're talking about the NES port here, which was significantly watered down. In the PC versions, when you traveled the city, the streets were named. They aren't named in the NES version, but you can still build a party of 6 folks, you still go through massive dungeons, and you can still have a great time playing this legacy franchise. Just be prepared to shell out 21 to 40 hours to beat it. This franchise still exists, by the way. In 2018, they released the Bards Tale 4 Barrows Deep, which is kind of mid, but hey, if you dig the franchise, you dig the franchise. Ultima V is an amazing RPG and a huge boost from Ultima 4, which in some ways was already fairly advanced for the time. It continues the story of the Avatar, where we collected the 8 virtues. We're called back to Britannia by our friends Lolo and Shimino by way of a magic coin, which, fun fact, actually came in the box of the PC version as a feelie. Once you meet your friends, shit hits the fan. Turns out Lord British was lost in an expedition, and this absolute tool bench of a human being, Lord Blackthorn, rules in his stead. So our main objectives are to rescue Lord British, remove Blackthorn from the throne, and eliminate the Shadow Lords. And you have 22 glorious hours of fun ahead of you to do it, 58 if you want the full experience, and yes, it will be painful. Out of the 3 NES ports of Ultima, Ultima 5 is considered exceptionally underperforming to the PC version, and I chalk it up to the fact that Ultima 5 is just so in-depth and expansive that the NES couldn't handle it. Even Ultima 4 was pushing the envelope. We can't talk about Wizardry 2 and not talk about Wizardry 1, the big daddy of the franchise, one of the first RPGs ever created, Wizardry Proving Ground of the Mad Overlord. Now, this is the only game in the franchise I've beaten, and let me fill you in on something. This is a little pro tip from me to you. There's this PS1 game called Wizardry: The Lulgaman Saga, and it's epic. It's a Japanese PS1 game, but there are options for changing the text to English. You know how Japanese people can be like kind of dedicated to source material? They applied that to the American RPG. So I prefer to play it because A, it's got a map, B, it looks gorgeous, and C, it's on the PS1. But in returning to the original Wizardry on the NES, we're dealing with 6 different floors of enemies and assorted nonsense. But good news, it is easy to start it. Wizardry might seem daunting, but it's really approachable. If you want to see where RPGs began, then I strongly suggest you take a look at it, but choose your port wisely. In modern eras, we can't load a save disk like before, unless you use emulation, and even then, the last thing you want to do is to get tons of levels during your 25-hour grind session and then lose all of that progress. I know nothing about Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, but I do know some stuff about SSI Gold Box games, and the consensus I've encountered in speaking about them is that they are incredibly boring. But what do I know? I'm just a silly boy. I also have this bias because I like Pathfinder over D&D, but that's neither here nor there. Pool of Radiance was the first game in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rule set to be adapted to a video game. And one thing I hate about the early AD&D games are that they put so much information on the screen. But luckily for you, the NES version has a pretty simplified interface. The top are your actions, active and passive. The right is your golden gems count, and the bottom is your party, which again, in traditional AD&D rules, you get 6 people and you go to town on the bad guys in the Forgotten Realms setting, working our way to Tyrant Thraxus the Flamed One to kill him. That's it. Now obviously there's more to this, and you will see all of what it has to offer during the 26-hour grind you'll encounter. Dragon Quest is awesome if you like JRPGs. If you don't like JRPGs, then you're probably not going to have a good time, because they are a grind fest. Personally, as a streamer on Twitch, I don't mind the grind because I'm usually talking to up to 20 people about different stuff, and it's very distracting, but it makes the process significantly less monotonous. If you're playing this in your living room, however, chances are it's going to be a long haul. Dragon Quest III, or Dragon Warrior 3, if you're playing the Famicom version, is one of 5 games to involve Erdrick, and the final game in the Erdrick trilogy, even though in Dragon Warrior 2, you play as a descendant of Erdrick. There's also tons of differences from the earlier 2 games, such as class systems, a day and night cycle, and characters that can be traded out. They tend to hang out at the tavern once you unlock them. Plus, if you like gambling, you can bet at the arena. It's a large game, and because it is a large game, you can count on spending 28 to 33 hours trying to beat it. Dragon Warrior obviously still exists, and the most recent game came out last year, Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. Might and Magic Book 1, The Secret of the Inner Sanctum, is the first game in the Might and Magic franchise, a long-standing legacy franchise that's been featuring games since 1986. It was created by New World Computing and designed by the lovely couple John and Michaela Van Caneghem. I don't know how to say that. John and Michaela Van Caneghem? Canham? With a last name like that, you're kind of destined to make an RPG. Anyway, Might and Magic plays very similar to D&D. You have a baseline class set, statistics that are very similar to ability scores for those who do play D&D, and we have 2 types of spells, offensive and offensive alignments, the usual. Now, what makes this game so long is that the world is not free-flowing. It's a fucking labyrinth. That is to say, a maze. And yes, if you play this, you're going to have to whip out the old graph paper, which I'm 100% for, but because of this, combined with the slow pace of the game, we're going to invest roughly 43 to 77 hours to find the bad guy and travel to another world, because that's what Might and Magic is all about. A fine mix of high fantasy and science fiction. It is a long game, but if you're playing the NES version, you're going to have a good time. The PC versions I've encountered are very rudimentary, but that's how I roll. The most recent Might and Magic game was Might and Magic 10 Legacy, and it doesn't look that bad. These games are all titles that you'll have to invest time into, which is a valuable asset. I would know. There's nothing more strange than picking up your newborn and blinking, and the next thing you know, they're telling you they don't need your help to buckle their car seat anymore. It's magical. I wouldn't trade it for the world. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing, and if you're feeling particularly generous, feel free to hit that thumbs up button. The YouTube High Council sits and observes the power of the thumbs, and it's the only way my videos get exposure. I'd also love to hear about your experiences with the games on this list. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortifier out.